Hello, I want to welcome everyone to the Power of Our Story. We are a community where veterans, first responders, and all protectors can connect, share their experiences, and heal together. So today we are starting a new group, and I'm going to hand it over to Scott Duncan and Barry Zworestine to share what it's all about. So, Scott?
Well, thank you, Sarah, as always. Barry, good morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, Scott, and a pleasure. I love Scott, man. This guy's a brother, and I think the fact that we can sit and combine our experiences and thoughts and have other people contribute is an absolute gift. I guess the one thing I've realized, and I can talk more in a short while, is just how lost we all are, and especially my generation, which overlay with the Vietnam generation, how we had no clue. There was no technology, there were no groups like this, there was no research, there was no healing modalities. So yeah, we'll add that to the conversation in time.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way about you, Barry. And, I'm just going to get this out up front. I always joke with him about this, but I think as you listen over the next few minutes, uh, you're going to just fall in love with Barry's voice, right? He's just there's something about the tone and his accent. It's like you can just hit play and, anyhow.
Okay, just keep the
So
visual off, that's all.
that's right. Yeah, that's funny. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to briefly introduce ourselves so that the folks that are on live and the folks that will see this recorded will, have some understanding of who we are. And then we're going to talk to our why. Why are we wanting to do this? Why are we wanting to help folks? That's important. And then we're going to briefly bring up a slide, which is going to show what we're focusing on and the outside influences on that main focus and the things that challenge us as veterans and as people as well. So with that, Barry, if you don't mind, if you could start off your introduction and then and I'll
Jump
hit
on that
mine.
after.
Okay.
So, I'm a combat veteran from the Rhodesian Bush War, 1970, 76, 77. And of course, at that time, which was, as I said, it's the kind of overlay with the Vietnam generation, there was really no knowledge, nothing. In fact, even now, as Scott was talking, I was reflecting that maybe for the first 30 odd years, I don't even remember being at war. I never woke up with the thought of being at war. It didn't exist. It's the strangest thing when I go back. The thought of being a veteran, being in the military, I had nothing. I didn't have photographs anywhere or books. It just disappeared, but it didn't really disappear. And when I look at the evidence of my journey, which is five immigrations, two marriages, um, I can see that something wasn't right. And I also realize that where most veterans and with trauma, we have defaults, which is either high risk activities or alcohol. I was running. So marathons, ultra marathons, I was running and running and running. And it took a while to realize that eventually I had to stop. And then it's kind of the wolves of the past kind of started to circle me. And as a psychologist, I was a teacher in those days. And then I went back because I realized teaching was ridiculous. I can't spell and I have learning issues. So I realized that sitting with veterans here in Australia over the past 23 years, I realized that as much as I thought that I had healed this thing I had forgotten about, that I didn't really remember, I started to realize that I was also processing. And slowly sitting with the guys, my story began to emerge slowly to my understanding. And I started to work out the territory that all of us seemed to be going through. As they were talking to me, I began to spot the things like, and we'll go on the diagram, like loss of identity, loss of purpose, loss of meaning, loss of tribe, just that constant restlessness. And I slowly started to understand the map, both for the guys I was working with and my own personal map. And then from that, in 2022, I had this dream, and it came from a song, which is the song is about a singer that leaves his song behind, and the challenge was, what song do we leave behind when we are no longer here? And I realized that I wanted to leave something behind after 22 years of sitting with the most extraordinary brothers. And it was predominantly male. There were a few good sisters in that, but they were mostly men, and from the Vietnam generation and then from the Australian current serving generation. And I realized that something had grown between myself and these extraordinary people that I loved with a passion. And my book emerged, and it was really a book on transitioning. And what emerged between myself and the people that I was sitting with was I started to understand that in the language of veterans, there was all the terminology to learn to heal without drawing on psychobabble, and that we needed to, I found a way of sitting within veteran territory to create healing. So it was a bottom up rather than the psychologist, the modality, my chair, your chair. I have this sort of a modality, and we will use that. It was the flip side, and very much what Doc Springer says is, which really hit me strongly, was in working with veterans and myself. Are we going to be the doctors? So we take this kind of distant, disembedded vision of healing, or are we going to be the docs? Which is really where we take time to understand the territory and we talk from within that place. And so from the book, I also began to develop a concept of a veteran-informed approach, which is, I believe it's important because if all we are doing is coming from a scientific, technical, or psychological approach, it's always about our territory rather than the territory of the people we're sitting with. So I have a passion for this. I realize how many of us have suffered at the hands of transitioning and the complexities of it. And I also worry, and I also understand now how little that territory is mapped. And I'm hoping that this group will give an opportunity to create a map and to orientate a compass, to really help us to, one, share the kind of things that are impacting on us, and to heal, and for that healing to be passed forward as we should. We are in service here. So I'm happily married. It took 60 years to eventually find enough healing to draw in an extraordinary woman, and from Brazil. I kind of cross cultures. And I have 3 kids, one of whom is in the police, and that's a story for another day. But yeah, so I always say my war stopped after 60 years, but for the first 40, I hadn't realized I was at war. So yeah, looking forward to sharing conversations with everyone. So back at you, Scott.
Hey, thanks, brother. And it just dawned on me. I've done it to myself again. I've got to follow Barry, so that's a tough spot to be in. I should have gone first, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, hey, thanks, man. So, but before I introduce myself, I want to I don't want to forget to talk about this because uh, when you talked about having a compass to navigate from, essentially, it reminds me of being a Marine. You know, 30 some years back to when I was a new second lieutenant going through what's called the basic school in Quantico. All Marine officers have to go to the basic school. It's a 6 month course where you learn to become a provisional platoon commander. That no matter what occupation you go into, you're a grunt first, right? Infantrymen first, riflemen first. So you learn how to essentially control a platoon in combat. You understand and fire all the weapon systems, how to call for fire with artillery, how to do a CASEVAC, how to use the radio. It's very, very comprehensive. But you also learn land nav there. And land nav in a day is relatively easy. But land nav at night in the dark when you're by yourself and alone is a very different terrain. And I think that kind of talks to what you were saying a bit. When the light's out there, things are easy, but when you're in dark times and struggle, if you don't have an understanding of how to navigate, you're going to get lost, right? And I think that's part of what we're attempting to do here, as well, with what we're going to do over the coming weeks. So with that, I'm Scott Duncan. I'm a retired Marine. I served 21 years in the Marine Corps. I retired in 2012. I was a logistician by trade, operational logistician. I'm a Iraqi combat veteran, Interesting war, which I won't get into the details of that, but uh, I grew up with a grandfather who was a Marine. He served in the Second World War. He fought in the Battle of Tarawa, which was one of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. He came back and into the fire department and did that for about 35 years. So he was essentially my dad. He was a stellar man, and thank God he was there. I think I learned a lot from him, and I've always said if I could be a third of who he was, that I would be doing good. And I think I'm about a third of who he was, but he was a fantastic man. But so I spent, I got out of high school. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Um, the bombing in 1983 of the Marine barracks happened in Beirut, and I was heading to the recruiter, and my grandfather, who served as a Marine, pulled me aside and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm doing what you did when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor." What kind of a question is that? He's like, "Son, you don't understand." He said, "It's not the same. This terrorist stuff is different. Why don't you try college? And then if you still want to go into the Marine Corps, do that." So, like always, he gave me good advice. I was, a knuckle dragger, so I didn't necessarily think it was good advice. I felt I was kind of ticked, like, what, I'm not good enough to be a Marine, and, you're stupid when you're young. Well, at least not all of us are. I certainly was. But, but he was right, and I took his advice and, fast forward, wound up doing, again, 21 years, retired in 2012. And then I got into the veteran space. And I've been doing that since retiring. So I've been doing this for 12 years. And I wound up getting with two nonprofits. I founded the second one, co-founded with some folks, and we started putting people to work, people being folks transitioning from service, veterans. We were recruiting, training, and then placing them in the renewable energy sector across the United States. Wound up partnering with the Department of Energy and got in with the Solar Ready Vets program. And so that was a good thing. Um, Wind up connecting with Sarah here on LinkedIn. And that was, I don't know, 2019, 2020-ish. And have been a a very blessed member of that community. I can say that the experience with the power or with the power story has absolutely changed my life in a couple of different ways, and I can talk about that, on different uh, airings of this program. But I am blessed and thankful that all these folks that are in the power story are in my life. Uh, I'm married. I've been married for 38 years this past December. That's crazy. It's hard to believe. That time has flown by. My wife is an incredible woman. I never, ever worried about being away, whether I was, overseas in combat or whether I was just on temporary travel. I never worried. I mean, I missed her and the girls, but I always knew that she had everything under control. Very, very capable, very smart, accomplished woman, and I'm very thankful for her. I've got two daughters. They're grown now. They're both in relationships that I think may wind up being permanent, right? And that they get married and hopefully have grandkids. I know my wife is definitely she's there, right? But anyhow, so that's me in kind of a large nutshell, I guess. But very thankful to be here. And so what I want to do now is kind of switch to our why. Why are we doing this? And so that I don't have to follow Barry, I'm going to give my why first. I'm going to
Yeah, good.
transfer it back over to you, brother. So yeah, part of my why is over time I've learned that helping people is important, right? And there's a lot of ways to help people. And volunteering is the quickest and the easiest way to help people because there are less barriers to volunteering. And, you can pick and choose what you want to do when you volunteer, right? You're not voluntold like you are in the military. Very different. But it didn't take long for me to realize after I transitioned out that I wanted from the military that I wanted to help veterans. And that's why I got into the veteran space and looking to get folks jobs coming out of the military. And these weren't high level jobs. These were jobs to help people that had maybe done 3 or 4 years and want to move on. They're not sure what they want to do. Some want to go to college, but others are looking to start a business or they just need a job, right? So that's what we were doing. Most of them were entry level. Some were, mid level with the organization that I was helping to place people with. But I felt that since I transitioned, that my transition didn't go well. And the reason it didn't go well is because I decided to retire. I had a plan, and the Marine Corps changed my plan. I mean, it's all fine. It wasn't anything negative. It was just at that point, I was at 21 years and I had a vote and I could retire. So I decided, thank you very much, Marine Corps. I'm not going to take this next set of orders. That's going to put me away from my family even more. And I've been there, I've done that. I'm ready to roll on. So I had about 90 days to transition and leave the Marine Corps and figure out what I was going to do. And like most good Marines, I didn't spend time on myself. I was there to the very last day. I was a battalion commander. I just couldn't walk away. So I had to close things out smartly and then step out into this new existence as a civilian, not being one for nearly a quarter of a century, trying to figure out, well, who am I? What do I even like to do? What hobbies do I have? Everything I did was focused on the Marine Corps and in operations. And so, I felt a bit lost. And, like Barry said, we'll put that slide up. I felt very separated from who I was. And it was a very odd feeling because I'd always been very confident in who I was. And so I figured, man, if I'm having these issues, I did pretty good as a Marine. I'm very educated. But if I'm struggling, well, imagine what some of these younger folks are doing that don't have the life experience and the perspective that someone, my age at that point had. What are they going through? And we all have different lives, right? Some of these folks get out and maybe they're struggling through a divorce because their spouse and them couldn't work things out, while they were in the military and they get out and then they can't get a job and maybe they turn to alcohol or drugs and they start to spiral and they get way off their path. And there's a lot of folks that do that. And I think most of us on this call understand that suicide in, the military and first responder communities are high. They're higher than the average, civilian. And so all those things weighed on me to okay, like my grandfather said, service is important, and that's what he did. His life was a life of service. So I felt that it was important for me to model that if I really was going to be serious about wanting to help and try to be that good person. So, so my why is that I want to help people, and it doesn't have to be just people in the military, right? It could be people that are struggling with very similar things that we all struggle with, and as we've said so many times, if you can just help one person, right? When we had our facilitator call, that came up, hey, we can spend a lot of time, we can talk, we can do all the things we do. And if this one person is positively impacted, who knows what that person's going to do with their time in helping others too? You get that ripple effect. And I think that is true. I've seen it in my life, and I think it's important that we understand that. So I'm here because I choose to be here. It's because I want to help people, and because I get to spend time with folks like you, and I've got a partner like Barry here that is going to really open this thing up. I think there's an art and a science to this, and I think that we're both going to look at both sides of that. I think Barry, he's got his science part down, but he's very artful in his presentation too. And so I'm really excited to see what he has to say and what we do together in the coming months. So Barry, back at you, bro.
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Scott. And Scott said something that really hit me when he talked about navigating. It's easy in the daytime, but it's really difficult at night. And part of one of my learning issues is that I have a pathological lack of a sense of direction. It's frightening. Even today, if I go into a shopping center, I've got to park in the same place. As I said to my wife, when I come out in the wrong place, it's like God put his hands down and went chick, 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 and reorganized the world, and I have no clue where I am. So you can imagine what that was like in the 70s. I kind of that when I left is when I really had no map, and I was really stuck. I was fighting in a four-man stick in the Rhodesian Bush War on the Mozambique border, and I was a medic, a very specialized medic. So we could drip drugs, cut downs, administer all sorts of advanced drugs, morphine, pethidine, hydrocortisones. There was nothing we could do until the choppers came to pick the bloke up and take them away, and then we would move on again. But when I left, in 10 days, I was back at university, literally in 10 days. So there was no farewelling. You just finished, packed your bag, went back to my parents' home, got on a plane, flew to South Africa, and I was at university waking up 20 times a day with headaches and body aches and pains. And I couldn't, even today, when I look back, I realized I had no clue that that was even linked to service. It was just, why am I like this? I asked my friends about, about 6 years ago, how did you see me when I arrived at uni? And they said, you were really buzzed out, talking really fast, hyper stressed. And I had no knowledge of that. So I was really stuck in the darkness. And in that darkness, I was doing what you do in the darkness is stumble around. Hence, all the immigrations constantly moving, making the wrong choices of relationships, just driven by impulse rather than any sense of light, any tool, any compass, any ability to navigate that really impacted on my well-being. And the classic case, I think, which was a really good example, was my first wife and I. We were in the UK. I was working in a bicycle shop in '84 when the first mountain bikes came out, and I went, I'll get a mountain bike, and I'm going to mountain bike to Israel. No map, no compass, no clue. And I wouldn't believe it unless I had a photograph. Bike piled up, guitar on the back, and off I went. 3 days down the road, a lot of pollen allergies, and that was it. And then I flew the bike to Israel. But that was a lot of my journey, was just turning up for things. I turned up for a 100-kilometer walk, realized I was with South Africa's top elite walkers when their club colors. And I plodded off in my old running shoes through wind and rain and literally nearly killed myself until about when I was 65, so a couple of years ago. I was running on my trails because I'd injured myself and could no longer do ultras. But I came back, measured my heart, it was 200 beats a minute. And I realized that something needed to change. Now, even though I'd started working with veterans and I realized two things were impacting on my why. The one was I realized the gift of being at service, and I realized how that was beginning to heal parts of me. Even while I was sitting with people, I was also on a healing journey, except the difference was I was there for their story, they weren't there for mine. So I realized that I wanted service to be a critical part of my life, where what I was doing was not to earn, but was to be present to and share with and benefit from others that I was sitting with. And the second thing I realized, which I'd never realized in all those years, was the importance of being in tribe. And I think the tribe concept really epitomizes for me in the power of our story. And I was saying to the guys the other day that the interesting thing is when you locate back in tribe, it doesn't matter what happens during the week, that the tribe internalizes in us. It's even though we are not physically there, we are there with each other in our hearts. I was saying that as veterans, as first responders, we share one heartbeat. We know each other. And that's the most wonderful thing about the tribe of first responders and veterans, is that there's not a lot we need to say, but we know intimately what we can hear each other. Such powerful things. So even in moments of my week, if I kind of get of stuff on the edges of myself and I sit back and I know, well, I'm in tribe, I've got brothers and sisters I can call on. it's just when rest, your soul begins to rest. And so I've realized that for so long. And I was a psychologist.
I think we may have lost Barry. Can you guys hear me? Okay, so it's not just me then. Okay. Well, just so folks know, Barry is actually in Australia. So that's probably part of it, even though Chris is still here from New Zealand. So I guess they have better service in New Zealand.
Marginally.
But yeah, he's going to pop back on here. Looks like he's
Yeah.
looking like he's reconnecting here. But and that's just what happens when you're doing live programs, right? It's all good.
I think I'm
But
back.
yeah, yeah, we can
Um,
hear you. Your picture's
yeah,
not, your
yeah.
video's not up yet.
And let's try again. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know
looks
what
good.
happened there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I realized that I wanted to contribute to the fact that so many people are lost and so many people suffer. I remember sitting in the corner of a room and watching the walls move in just from such rapid collapses consistently over time. I realized that probably the most profound aspect of healing was to invite people back into tribe. And really, you can have as much therapy as you want, but we still need tribe. And often in tribe is where the most profound healing happens because we carry each other into our daily activities. And so, this opportunity, one, to be in tribe, and two, for Sarah to raise the possibility of us having a place where people can gather no matter what age, no matter what war, and no matter what country they come from, was a gift. And I think we need more places like this where, as a tribe, we can create the map, we can find a compass, and through the shared experience of our stories and our contributions, we increasingly give ourselves and others around us the opportunity to heal um, with love and care. So yeah, that's kind of my why.
Yeah, I like that love and care thing. I think that's so important. That makes a lot of sense. And well, Barry, let's do this for the sake of time. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen on your pictorial that you came up with the other day. And so what this is, I'll put it up in a second, but this is it says a lot, and I think it's very enlightening what it says. And Barry is going to talk to it. We're going to kind of go back and forth on it, but he's going to lead the charge with kind of going through this. And essentially, this is laying down a foundation and a baseline for what it is we're looking to do in terms of the things we're going to talk to. And we'll be bringing people in, people being other veterans, who have served in different parts of the world with different militaries, doing what they did. They're going to come in. We're going to talk to them about things that you'll see on this chart here, and we'll even bring in people for panel discussions too. I think this is going to be pretty cool. Both men and women that have served, and I think Barry, we talked about spouses of
Mm,
the veterans.
mm.
So we're going to kind of open this thing up here and get a lot of really good folks in to share their stories. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share this, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Barry. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
I was just sitting actually last night and just trying to create a map of everything I'd been writing about and something visual. And I don't know why the triangle came to me, but I thought about what is the skin that holds the circle together. So the tribe is the yellow one. And in a tribe, we are in a circle. And a tribe is timeless. We've always sat around fires, we have rituals, we belong. But it needed to be contained. And I was thinking about the pillars of that containment. And the three that came to me were one is faith, which I think, Scott, maybe a good thing for you to address as well and talk through. Tribe, which I've mentioned, and wellness. And I mean, I don't think this is a finished product. It's really, I just mind mapped everything that was jumping up in my head. And I think part of the benefit, part of what our vision is for this group is what will over time as it evolves. Because this is just a beginning. It's the baseline. Then the stuff I said for many people lived in darkness somewhere in darkness. And I've seen both with people I've sat with, the core things that have come up over the years were things like loss of tribe, loss of belonging, loss of purpose, PTS, because I don't believe in disorders. I don't think veterans and first responders are disordered, and I don't like that term. Moral injuries, and by moral injuries, I don't just mean injuries sustained at war by seeing things that are offensive or are so challenging visually. I'm also talking about when one's organization betrays you. And I've seen a lot of that, and I know many guys on the group have experienced moral injuries from within their own organizations, which is where your tribe becomes the enemy. And that has quite a profound impact. I see grief, and I know probably if I had to identify, probably the biggest thing that I carry is grief. And what came to me at some point was that when I strip away, and even sitting with the guys, when we stripped away the story, the anger, the drinking, the chaos, underlying all of that all the time was grief. And I know that easy to do anger, irritability, and reactivity, easy to push yourself physically, but I can only speak as a man. Probably grief is the most difficult thing to sit with. It's so profoundly uncomfortable because in grief we are vulnerable, and vulnerability, I can speak for myself, is something that is still not easy. So that was a very powerful one. The imposter syndrome. I was in Sydney. We have veteran marches once a year, and everyone from World War II, not many left, to current day, it's an incredible event in the city. And I was with the Rhodesians and happened to be surrounded by our commanders who were, they did a lot of cross-border stuff and crazy stuff with our SAS and our reconnaissance units. And for that split moment in time, I felt as if I didn't belong because I hadn't done what they had done. And that really haunted me. And slowly, as I started talking to the guys I was sitting with, I'd say things like, how do you feel about wearing your medals? How do you feel about marching or being present in memorial ceremonies? And I could see people squirming. And really, when I'd say probably about 90+% of the people I've sat with have this imposter syndrome, and it's haunting. But we don't like talking about it, so it tends to stay invisible. The other one, as we said today, was the transitioning complexities. And as I said, I still don't feel the map's good enough, and I feel a lot of organizations that support veterans with benefits and the transitioning complexities are thin on the surface and are sometimes more a part of the problem than the solution. Then, of course, there's just operational impacts. And I'd like to separate out PTS from, let's say, combat stress, where you don't have trauma, but you have the impacts where most of us are a little bit hypervigilant. We like facing doorways. I know and as a psychologist, I know my wife will find the chair that faces the door and offer it to me. And I go, this is illogical. I should know better. But boy, it's a lot more comfortable. So, these all, it's the oddness and the strangeness of first responders and combat veterans or veterans that, I always talk to the partners about. They are different kind of an animal and learning to understand the eccentricities. I know these things can impact on relationships. And, I know Catherine, when she talked about it, was talking about veterans and their children. And I know it can have a massive effect on our ability to connect with others. And I think the whole thing of navigating back from who you were to being a civilian is also a massive challenge. And a part of what I understood was that I often say we should not be leaving our worry behind, but we go back, we rescue and heal the wounded attributes, we bring the strengths forward, we combine it with our civilian, and we actually get a better human. So those are the kind of things that came to me on this map. And so I'd like to see that as a beginning for us as a group. And the contribution of all of us to add to that map, challenge that map, and extend that map.
Absolutely. And I think you touched on a great point that, this beginning of where we are on this slide, as we further develop it over time, it might, morph and change. Some things may be added, maybe there's more dimensions to it that, we haven't come across yet. But I think this is a great foundation, Barry. I appreciate the fact that you spent time in putting this together. And looking at all the things that go to the challenges that we face, um, looking at all of those, I can just about say that yes, I've experienced all of those. Uh, and so I think that's a good chart. I know, grief. I have grief for Marines and sailors that in the 21 years of my service that didn't make it, either through a combat death or through suicide or even training accidents, and that's those things haunt you. It's always there, right? Moral injuries, look at how the United States left Afghanistan. Now, I was retired, but that still was front page news for me. And I couldn't imagine how I would have felt if I was serving at the time. You know, that's a big one. Loss of purpose. Yeah, I experienced that. I absolutely did. I wasn't sure who I was and where I was going. I didn't let anyone else know that, but it was certainly happening inside here and inside here. In relationships, they absolutely struggle in all this because you're not 100%. You're trying to figure out a lot of things that at that point in my life, age-wise, I didn't think I should be having to, experience. I was like, I'm better than this. Come on. But that's what happens in life, and it's okay because you can get through it. And looking at the triangle, I think for me, what I like about this triangle is I could even flip the triangle upside down, putting faith at the bottom as a foundation. But to me, it all balances on my faith, right? That if you flip that triangle upside down, everything's balanced on that faith. And if I'm not walking in my faith, I can feel it go to the left or I can feel it go to the right. But I know when I'm focused, it's right in the middle. And that's a good place to be. Um, I personally, I'm a Christian, and not everybody is, and that's fine, right? We all have our lives to live in things that we believe. But for me, faith is a very strong component, and that's helped me through my walk to really get an understanding of who I am and why I'm here, and what I believe my role is in life going forward, which is another reason why I'm wanting to get involved in helping folks. So, well, with that, I'm gonna put this back over to Sarah so she can stop the recording. And then what we're going to do for folks that can stay on, if they want to, chat a little bit after this, we can do that. But I know we do have a time limit today. And I think in the future, we're going to probably try to keep it to about maybe 40 minutes. So it's not too long. And then if we decide that we're going to have the conversations recorded, we can even look to do that too. But I think for today, based on time, we're going to go ahead and end this for today. I do want to thank everyone for being on board with us today, our inaugural kickoff to this program. And I think we're going to come up with a naming convention for this. And I think I've got one, but before I say anything, I want to share that with Barry offline because we've been talking about that. But as he was talking, something just clearly came into my line of sight. So Barry and I will figure that part out. So Barry, you have any closing words real quick?
Yeah, I mean, Scott, thanks. It's again just to be able to share the space with you, but also it was pretty frontal today. But I think from next time onwards, it's a collaborative, shared communication between all of us. It's a mutual endeavor to not only add to our own journeys and have a space where we can share our journeys, but collect the wisdom, the compass, and the map that hopefully will drive it forward. So other people sitting alone in their units with a pistol by the side, have a place that they can come to and some wisdom that can give them a little bit of hope and light in the darkness. So, yeah, this is a good beginning.
Absolutely.
And I really want to thank all of you. I mean, all of you, I know, Chris, for taking the time to come all the way from New Zealand. I love you, brother, and it's a pleasure to share your journey with us as well.